I'm not black. We're still affected and impacted by the whole idea of race. Um, and of course, throughout, we could talk about this later if we have time. Of course, we change what it means. The original definition of black, we made black is beautiful, and my black is beautiful, and different things. Black power, we talk about that as well. We change and reshape the definition over time as a people. But yeah, that construct is dangerous. It is evident, and what we're dealing with today is a result.
Color, your experiences as it relates to police overreach or harassment have perhaps been not quite as bad because lighter color skin, smaller, that the bigger you are, the darker you are, the more suspect that you are. That even that piece.
Exactly. Yeah. When I shared some just a few incidents I had. I teach at a college that's in Carroll County, Maryland, which if you live near there or you're familiar with Carroll County, really a hub for the Klan for years. They recently started sending out more information, pamphlets and stuff, trying to recruit people there. But anyway, I recognize even in those incidents, because I am lighter skinned and because I am smaller framed, that I even have a privilege due to colorism. My darker skinned brothers and sisters would probably more likely get treated differently and more aggressively than even I would, because I'm small and I'm lighter skinned.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Jeremy, you want to add to that?
I was just gonna say, I think it's also important to recognize, one of the greatest mediums to perpetuate this has been television and the silver screen.
Yeah.
So even aside from, and that's what I'm saying, the shape shifting nature of racism is that it doesn't require a human host to proliferate. You know what I mean? It can move through systems. And when it comes to, you look at television, look at the way in which, to your point with colorism, the way darker skinned people are portrayed in television. The darker the person, the more seedy, the brute, the bigger the person. There are these constructs in television, and so here's what's true for a lot of people: is if you don't live in an environment that has, you know, different races and cultures and people, and all of your information is coming through, a television screen or through some other medium, right? You're going to form. It's not that I did this implicit bias training because I'm a foster parent, and part of what we had to do is implicit bias training. And so I did it, and one of the phrases that the trainer said, he said, "Look, you're not bad. You're just operating within the framework of how programming works. When certain images are given to you and a narrative is tied to that image, eventually you're gonna just be partial to whatever narrative has been portrayed for you." And I think so often, we don't recognize, it's like having the conversation to say, hey, you got some biases that are impacting the way in which you engage. It feels, and maybe it should, a little bit like an indictment. But when you start peeling back the layers, I heard someone say it's impossible for you to have grown up in America and not being racist because all of the mediums, all of the systemic nature of it, it's constantly feeding you this information that's continuing to double down on these ideas that are so inconsistent with reality. And so I think it's important to recognize that, television, and now, of course, now it's all, on computers and cell phones and all this kind of stuff, even the news cycle. Look at the way in which certain things are portrayed in the news, in news. Like, it's all trying to drive home this narrative that locks us in. And then when we act out of the narrative, we are penalized for it in some respect, but truthfully, it's programming.
Hmm.
It's for the system has been programming. And here's what's crazy about this. We talk about colorism. It's even programming Black people. There have been divides within our community from this same programming. I've watched Black filmmakers portray darker skinned men as, the antagonists and the lighter skinned men as the heroes. Yeah. Perpetually, right? So I think it's just important to recognize that a lot of what we're receiving, by virtue of media, is shaping our perspective. And we got to be real careful about that.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go to the next level on this next question. And I'm setting you up. Why does it seem
Richard's
that...
going to take this one. This is your question, Richard. This is your question.
Richard, you can start on this one. I think Jeremy's going to jump in over you, though. Why does it seem that Black Lives Matter revolves primarily about police brutality or police abuse and doesn't seem to be addressing the Black on Black crime? So that question is out there. It gets asked a ton. And I want you guys to talk about that. I want you guys to talk about that.
Sorry. All right. So the Black Lives Matter movement focuses a lot on the criminal justice system. True. It also focuses on issues of healthcare, economic inequality, anything that's affecting and impacting Black lives. Thing is, what we've seen and what has been addressed and what has been visualized and what we see in the media is usually police brutality. So that's one point. But to make the statement about, why not focus on Black crimes or Black on Black violence is really a false equivalency. And it's, I'm trying to say this. I'm trying to be godly. No,
I'm watching the wheels spinning.
It's erroneous. I'll give you an example. When I was younger, I was going through graduate school. I drove a box truck delivering groceries. This was before you had DoorDash and other things, right? So we would get this manifest in the beginning of our shift. And it was myself and a white gentleman. And we looked at our manifest, and I was going to predominantly white area, and he was going to a predominantly Black area. And he said, Richard, can we switch? Because you're going to be safer in your area, and I'm going to be safer in mine. See, they're not going to mess with me in my area, and I know about Black on Black crime and stuff, but you'll probably be safer there. And what I shared with him was, to be upfront, I would actually be, you would actually be safer going to the Black area, because white people are more likely to kill white people, and Black people are more likely to kill Black people. Asian people are more likely to kill Asian people. And the list goes on.
Yeah.
And when we talk about why not focus on Black crime, that's a problem of it's erroneous, because it just shows how our narrative, the narrative that has been given, is filtered through our racism. And I'm not whoever asked this question, I'm not saying you're racist, but I'm saying it's filtered through our racist system in a society where we're focused on one group and focus on all the problems of that group. And we say, oh, why not black on black crime? But white on white crime happens just as much. But we just don't talk about it. We just don't focus on it. We just don't highlight it. We don't say anything about it because it's in a sense normalized. It is not seen as a problem in our society.
Yeah.
So to say why not focus on black crime? And here's the last point, and then I'll again take my seat. What we have to recognize is that the focus is on those who have the sworn duty to protect and serve. I, as a black man, have no duty to protect and serve. So the standard for me should be a lot lower than the standard for those that are in those positions to maintain justice and order. You cannot say that they're at the same level. Yeah. So the standard for those who are a part of our criminal justice system, standard for police officers, is a lot higher than the regular Richard Smith walking down the street. Yeah. Because they took an oath to protect and serve. I've never taken an oath. So therefore, if your oath is to protect and serve, that's what we're expecting of you. We're expecting you to protect and serve our community, but that's not what has happened. So often what we have seen and what has happened is that there's just punishment, taken advantage of, and brutality as a result of people who are in these positions, not everyone, but people who are in these positions and have not taken the oath or have not fully taken on the oath that they have been charged with. So.
Well, I think I posted this last week, just was saying that the most painful form of injustice is when those who are entrusted with the pursuit of justice act unjustly.
Yeah.
There's no more painful act of injustice than that. Jeremy, jump in.
Yes. So you're right. I love this question. Number one, I completely agree with Richard. When you talk about black on black crime, you're really talking about proximity crime. It's exactly what Richard said. In every community, the people of that community are largely going to impact whatever the crime element is in that community. Are going to impact those people. So without going too deep, we can talk about redlining, where people of color were forced to live in certain neighborhoods with each other, and talk about the systemic racism in that, and how that is having its impact in our culture. So that's number one. The proximity, I think it's I think for some it's well intended, for others it's a way to detract and divert from the real conversation. But it's proximity. I think number two, part of what challenges me about this question is that it assumes that there is not a lot of work being done in communities of color as it relates to proximity crime. There are tons of churches and small groups, para-churches and after-school programs and gang intervention programs and all sorts of programs, STEM and STEAM and you name it, and the rest, that have given their life's work has been to eradicate crime in their community. Now, they don't look at it as I'm eradicating black on black crime. They're saying, I want to be in a community that's safe for my kids. I want to be able to eat, work, play, worship in my neighborhood. And so I'm going to be part of the solution in our community to make that a reality. And so with that being the case, what you have is tons of folks. My church has been involved in that work for over 50 years. And I could name 100 other churches and small groups and non-religious groups that have been actively engaged in trying to combat the crime that takes place in their neighborhoods. But here's the last thing that I think is vitally important. When crime takes place of proximity in our neighborhoods, there is recourse. There is a system, as unjust as it may be in the execution of its duties, but there is a system that is designed to punish, to number one, to arrest, to prosecute, to try, and to punish when those things happen. There's a system in place. We don't have to manufacture a system. Now, I believe in self-policing. I do believe that we ought to be our brother's keeper in our neighborhood and do our best to try to, ward off having to involve, authorities if we don't have to. But ultimately, and I use this phrase, when if Jim were to kill or to beat up Sam, we're supposed to be able to call the authorities to have that dealt with. The problem is when it comes to, as Rod just mentioned, those who have been called to be the enforcers of justice, when they have, like any organization, institution has, when they have individuals that run up against those laws, think they're above them, and operate inconsistent with the vow, the oath that they took, there seems not to be the recourse. There does not seem to be the same process that holds them accountable for their actions. I'm not asking for the entirety of the 800,000 sworn officers in America to all be indicted, for the abuses of some. We're advocating for the ones who do the crime to have to do the time. That's what the advocation is for. And so the advocacy is for. And so with that being the case, the black on black crime conversation, even if it was a real which it's not a real conversation, it still is not the issue, because we've got a system that can deal with that. We just don't yet have a system that is robust enough to deal with the accountability needed when it comes to officers who operate beyond the law.
Yeah. And, we were talking earlier about like how you identify with an issue based on your own situation. And you were talking about, dealing with privilege as you were thinking about male privilege. And then all of a sudden the emotion starts to come like with that. As I've been processing through this, for me, where it starts to become emotional as it relates to this issue is thinking about abuses that take place at the hands of the clergy, and how I feel when I hear of some clergy who has grossly abused their power, and how I've stood up in church, and I'm sure that you all have as well at times, and said, okay, as a pastor, like I'm not that person. I'm not the one who did that, but this is my profession. And as a pastor, I'm sorry for what you have experienced at the hands of another clergy, of another pastor. And I think that's, I think of all of the law enforcement that are doing their best job to act justly. I think that voice is so helpful and so important. If those persons are saying that same thing, just like a pastor says, I am so sorry for the abuses that you have experienced in some other church, to be able to say that, like that matters. That says something. And the people who hear that, it says something to them. Like every time I have spoken that as a pastor about other pastors, I have people that come up and say, man, that was the most important thing, because I was abused by someone who's in the role that you're in. And so for someone who's in that role to say that, wow, that was incredible. Yeah. One last question, and then we'll wrap it up. But I wanted to it's kind of an amalgamation of a number of questions that have been asked about dealing with personal racism, just what's in a person's heart and how they are responding to their brother or their sister, and systemic racism that has to do with policies and procedures and laws and all of that. And I guess the question that I kind of the twist that I want to put on that is, as you all think about this moment that we're in, what do you most hope will not get lost as it relates to the systemic response in this? What would you look back on in 5 years or 10 years and go, wow, Richard, you started out by talking about moments that we've had and moments that we've missed. And as you think about this moment, what is it particularly that you think, I hope this gets addressed in this moment?
Well, as a pastor, I hope the church doesn't mess this up.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
I think a number of the moments that we've had, the church has messed up. Um, when the church could have been a leading voice for change, they opted for the status quo.
Mm.
And my hope is that in this moment, that the church will stand,
Mm.
and they will also move forward courageously. You know, and I know that might be hard, um, especially for white pastors, predominantly white congregations, to kind of lead their flock in that way, lead their people in that way. Um, but I think now is the time where
Mm.
the church can be on the right side of history.
Yeah.
Because if you look back, the church, the white church in particular, has been on the wrong side of history. And I'm hoping that now in this moment, um, there will be a difference. We can look back 10 years and say, yes, they got it right.
Yeah.
You got it right. That's one part. If I look back, um, I think also looking back, my hope is that we will not forget this moment. That is something that will stay with us, stay in our minds, stay in our hearts. And the changes and the focus on change, and all that would just continue, that we would build upon that, and that we would advance, and keep moving forward. Um, Going back to the moments, oftentimes we have a good moment and then we go back like 20 steps. We have a good moment and go back 20 steps. It's kind of this back and forth, just back and forth and back and forth. But I'm hoping this is a time where we can continue marching forward, continue to move forward, in this place, in this space, in diversity and social justice, and making sure that we are the type of country that we say we are.
Mm. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Jeremy? You on there? You there? Oh, the host won't let you unmute.
There we go. We got it. I think Valerie didn't like my last answer, so she shut me down. She was like, enough is enough.
I'm glad Valerie got my text. So.
Right.
Awesome.
Right. Don't unmute that guy. It's all good. I still love you, Valerie. Here's what I hope doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
I hope that what doesn't get lost in so much that's happening right now is that policy and politics matters.
Hmm.
And I know as a church, depending on what movement you're a part of, whatever, we sometimes have a bit of a disdain for politics and policy, but not unfortunately, but the truth is that policy matters, legislation matters, rules matter. Dr. King said it best: we cannot legislate morality, but we can regulate behavior. And regulate behavior through policy, through legislation. Now, I think this is a super, super, super hoop dream. I would love for the church to be able to rise up and to find candidates that we could agree on, you know what I mean, that really represent godly principles on both sides. Because there are people on both sides of the aisle that have positions, right? Like Republicans, Democrats, who feel like the other does not represent godly values, and vice versa. So I would love, in my fictitious, dreamy world where unicorns and pots of gold exist, for the church to be able to rise up. And I'm talking about the whole church: Black church, the white church, Armenian church, every church, right? Rise up and to find candidates that represent true, like, godly issues on the level, or on when it comes to social holiness, when it comes to personal holiness, when it comes to racial holiness, like, who represent that's a hoop dream. But until we get there, I think being able to look at legislation and policy and say, hey, the rules are going to have to change. And I think that's where the real, I think one of the where the real work goes. Because here's what we all know. We all know that we're never going to convince an entire population to all somehow now rid themselves of the racist history or what is, that might not be possible. But we can agree upon policies that reflect equity in the apparatus that we have in society that we all share. We all share criminal justice. We all share healthcare. We all share, like we share these functions in society. So we have to then tailor them to represent justice and equity for all the people that will participate in them. And so I think that that's what I hope this really gets into us saying, when it comes to policing, we're not saying get rid of, like I've heard like abolish the police force. That's lunacy to me. Like that's lunacy. How about instead of abolish the police force, let's just put in policies for how they are policed and accountability. And maybe they shouldn't be able to investigate their own situation. There ought to be an outside, unbiased third. I mean, policies. So I think that's what I'm hoping, that all of this energy gets. I told my church, I said, don't calm down, but channel it. Let's channel the rage into actionable items that we can get some policy changes all the way from the top down to some of the local, more civic, elements of our community. So that's what I hope doesn't get lost. I want to see change on the books. Now we'll work on how that gets manifested. We're gonna have to do some work when it comes. When the schools were integrated, we had to send in the National Guard to make sure that happened, right? So we'll work on that part, but let's at least get it on the books. Let's at least get some policies on the books that reflect equity in our communities and in our culture. And I think from there, that becomes for me a starting point when it comes to your question was the systemic racism in the culture. That's how I would deal with that part, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Don't calm down, channel it. Man, that's huge. Don't calm down, channel it. So guys, thank you so much. What a gift for us. And I know I speak for our whole congregation. Just thank you so much for this. I know you're in a lot of these conversations. I know it was a huge day for you, full day for you. And so spending time with us, this much time with us is just huge. Richard, I'm going to ask if you would, it's mostly Fairfax folks that are watching, and I'd love for you just to end with a word of prayer, just over us. That would be fantastic. And I just want to say to everyone, we're going to kind of continue this conversation tomorrow at my 11:02. And so it's on Instagram Live, Rod Stafford FCC, just at Rod Stafford FCC. That's all you have to do is just follow me and you'll get a notification about that. And be at 11:02. We'll do a Q&A. Richard is going to be a part of that. He's been gracious enough to jump in on that. And so we'll be following up maybe with some questions that we didn't deal with here that you want to deal with tomorrow. And then just let your friends know, I know you got a chance to see this, but we're going to post this and you'll be able to access it on our website, this whole webinar, the whole thing, starting, I think, tomorrow morning. And so it'll be available there. So if there are folks that that weren't able to be a part of this, just tell them to check in with our website in the morning, and it will be there, and they can watch the whole thing. So, guys, thank you so much. Richard, would you cover us in prayer?
Sure. Father, we thank you. And we say thank you because in the midst of all the bad, you are still good. Mm. We recognize, Lord, that your purpose has not changed, that you are still the same today, yesterday, and forevermore. So in this moment, Lord, we rely on you because you are our shepherd. We don't have to want for anything. But also we know that our hope is in you. We know that all things will come together because of you. So Lord, we ask that you would just move by your spirit in this nation. Lord, that in this moment of difficulty, hurt, pain, Lord, that life will spring forth. Lord, that changes will be made that need to be made. And that corrections that need to be, things that need to be corrected, Lord, that they will finally get corrected. Lord, our prayer, Lord, that you would just continue to use different ones, Lord, different pastors that are out there right now in their congregations, different people, Lord. But Lord, use us as the church to be a light in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation. Allow us to stand up, Lord, in this time, in this moment, Lord. Allow us to join in, but not just join in, Lord. Allow us to lead the way in saying enough is enough. Lord, there needs to be light. And you have called us the light in this earth. Help us to reflect your grace. Help us to reflect your goodness. But most of all, help us to continue the love movement that you have started in this earth. Lord, I ask that you would just touch each and every person that is on this or within this conversation today, Lord. Everyone that chimed in, Lord, help us all to be better in you, to be better people, to be brothers and sisters, to love our neighbors as ourselves. Lord, I thank you for Pastor Jeremy Dixon. I ask a special blessing will be upon his life, that you continue to do great and marvelous things in and through him, that you will cover his family and his ministry. And that, Lord, that we know that in his life, Lord, even as a young man, Lord, we know that the best is still yet to come. So use him mightily in LA, Lord. Allow his voice to speak, not just to people there, but throughout the nation and throughout this world. Lord, we thank you for Rod Stafford and Pastor Rod Stafford. And we ask, Lord, you would continue to do great things through his life. Lord, continue to cover him. And we ask, Lord, that your presence would be strong in and through him and his ministry. Lord, that when people look at Fairfax Church, they can see a clear example of what you meant as the church in the earth. Lord, we ask, Lord, that you would use all of us to your glory, that we will not waste this moment. We will not allow ourselves to fall back into status quo, but we will use this opportunity to move forward in love through you. So have your way with us. Lord, we're also mindful also of the leadership of this nation. Lord, we recognize that the change is needed. And we ask, Lord, that your presence would show up mighty and strong, even at the leadership of this nation, in the leadership of this nation, Lord, that you would move and that you would do what is necessary to be done so that we can move forward in this earth and continue the work that you have called us to do. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Richard. Love you guys. Thank you so much. All right. We'll see you. See you, everyone.
MAT.org for more information. Brought to you by America's biopharmaceutical companies. That's MAT.org.
I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down and still.